All right, people, so we are 3 sessions in, and I gotta say, I'm impressed with what Fedor Holtz has been able to do. When you look at where the metagame is, I think it's pretty clear when you watch this video. You're gonna notice that Victor has been overfolding, right? According to GTO, I guess assuming, that Fedor is probably under bluffing in spots, and what we found, I don't know that that's true. So one of the interesting things about when you play a heads-up match is, obviously both players are looking to play as close to game theory optimal as they can. But when you notice an opponent's doing something that is opposed to that, maybe you start to veer away from it to try to exploit them. But if you do that, be careful, because now they can go the other way. So let's take a look at some of these key hands, and I'll break one of them down a little more extensively. The first hand, we've got Jack 8 of spades on the button from Victor, raise, and then you're going to have a 3-bet from Fedor. Again, totally standard, and the play for Victor is just always to call with that hand. I don't think that hand even 4-bets ever. Notice, on a lot of 3-bet pots in the previous session, they were betting quarter pot. On a board like this, I guess Fedor believes that this is better for his range. I don't know if that's true, necessarily, because this kind of smashes the calling range as well. So he sizes up a little bit here. Instead of betting the 1,000, he goes for 2,700. And now for Victor, he's just got pretty much a call. I mean, you can raise here, but then what are you doing? Call is the standard play. So you're going to go ahead and call. Turn card's 7 of hearts. Now, Fedor has the ace of hearts, and he still doesn't have a pair. And, maybe he can try to push his opponent off a 10 or, some sort of pocket pair that peeled the flop or whatever. So he bets 56 into 9. And just a call from Victor. Now Fedor's like, oh boy, okay. So right now, I've missed completely. I have just ace high. But if my opponent was on a draw, the spade draw, then my ace high is good. And guess what? He doesn't have a spade in his hand, right? So for Victor, well, let's see first what happens here. So the check is over here. Now, Victor, typically when you're bluffing in these spots, you don't want to have spades because you want your opponent to have the spades, okay? Now, Fedor doesn't have any spades. You understand why that is, right? Because, you want your opponent to have nothing, and spades is nothing. So great call here from Fedor, picking it off, I think partly because he didn't have a spade and felt like, all right, this is going to be a king, or maybe a really good 10. But other than that, this is a bluff. 3-bet here again from Fedor. The 4-5 of clubs flops a really nice hand with the gut shot. And now he goes ahead again. This is a good flop. This is a good board for the higher bet size too. It favors the pre-flop raiser, I believe. And now he's at the bottom of his range. He literally cannot have a worse hand than this, but he does have the flush draw. And he's got a, gut shot to the idiot end. We see Victor's just got, open and straight draw now. He's got the ace of clubs too. I don't know, maybe he's planning on doing some shenanigans with that. So against that size, he's got pretty much has to call. And now for Fedor, it's just like a question of how often are you going to bluff here, right? And I think most of the time, as played, when you've raised pre, bet flop, bet turn with some size, you kind of have to follow through on that 7 and just hope that your opponent had a hand like Queen 10 suited or something like that. And he got it through. So another good bluff from Fedor there. I think it's a fine fold from Victor. I don't think you can just always call with ace high. So here we got Fedor with top pair now against Victor with nothing. And he's betting the 70% on the flop, which is a big bet. But again, on this board, 7-3 deuce, that favors the button. And again, with this small raise, we saw Victor do this earlier in a different hand where he had like absolutely nothing, but he had some back doors, right? So here he's got one overcard, backdoor straight, got a backdoor flush. If a club comes, he can go balls to the wall. But other than that, like in terms of very strong hands, he's not representing a ton, right? But really, this small check raise, like what are you selling here that you have, right? Are you doing this with just a 7? So it smells a little bit fishy, but again, some of the time you're going to have to do that. For Fedor, he's got a slam dunk easy call. Turn card's a queen. This totally disconnected board. The question is Victor's going to, now Victor's going to bet about whatever, 3/4 pot, something like that. And for Fedor, he's just going to have to call. Oh my God. So Victor just hits the 10. And now here's where like expert play is different than average play. Average play is like, oh my God, I got lucky. I hit the 10. Check. Or no, you've got the best hand now, almost assuredly. I mean, sure, Fedor could have queens up or something like that, but chances are, especially because you have the 10 of clubs, that Fedor doesn't have a hand like King 10 of clubs. He can't because, you block it. So in this spot with 14K and 11K in the pot, it's go time for Victor. And then if you're Fedor, you're sitting here with 7s and a king, right? You have no spade, you have no club once again, and none of the draws got there. No straight draws, no flush draws. So yeah, sure, a queen and a 10 are overcards, but you don't really, you're not too worried about those cards. if he's actually got value on the flop. As it turns out, I don't think Fedor can fold this hand for this price. I think this is this hand specifically, I think it has to call pretty much always, I would imagine. All right, so we got sixes open, jack 8 call. Good flop for the jack 8, open in a straight draw. 2 sixes. When you have a pocket pair and a pair of flops, you have the best hand a very high percentage of the time because there's less cards your opponent could have paired. Now the turn cards are 3. Nobody's got any hearts in their hand. And this is an interesting spot for Victor. Now he bets the 2/3 pot approximately. This is marginal, right? Because obviously he's applying pressure to draws and things like that. But it's a marginal hand. I don't have a problem with it, but I don't think you always bet the sixes here. I think there's a mix. And for Fedor, with the hand that he has, it's not a terrible check raise candidate. He blocks, it doesn't matter as much in heads up because the button's going to open a ton, but he does block 8-9 and jack 9 and jack 10 and all that stuff with his jack 8. Those are all hands that, Victor would certainly have. And so he's going to go for the check raise. I kind of like it. No heart in his hand. If a heart does come on the river, I think he has to abort mission. And then the river's a complete blank, and they're really deep. There's 10K in the pot. They've got 3 times the pot, 3x pot behind. So for Fedor, once he gets called, he's going to go for full pot. Now, if you're sitting here in your Victor, the 4 didn't change a dang thing, right? So if you think Fedor, when you call the turn and you think Fedor is capable of just having a draw here, you kind of have to, ooh, wow. So that's interesting. So notice when I said overfolding, you call this check raise on the turn. Got it. So you're saying you think you have the sixes are the best hand. 4 on the river. Now you don't think your sixes are the best hand. I don't know if you can get away with that in the long run, making plays like that. I think that that can be exploited by really, really good players. If you're overcalling turn and then overfolding river, it's kind of a recipe for disaster in a lot of ways. All right, we got jack 10 here against the queen 7. Fedor's got the gut shot. He's going to bet again. He's 70%. It's the sizing he likes to go with when he bets big. That's a good flop. Good flop texture for a big size for the button. It favors the button. Now queens and 7s, and you're seeing a pretty good size here. Now Victor doesn't really have a lot of check raises here. They really don't. So I like the check call. There's a lot of people like, oh, queens and 7s, protect your hand. That's old school thinking. You can get beat a lot here. Look, they're pretty deep at this point. So you check raise, you get called, you're gonna be in some danger here. So you want to have in your check call range some really strong hands as well, just in case your opponent likes to barrel off, 3 times. And the river card's an 8, which is not good for Victor, obviously. But he still beats a lot of hands, right? He beats all kinds of 9x, 5x, jack 10, as we can see. And for 4,500, again, this is a spot where about 3/4 pot. You've got a queen, you've got a 7. Here's the thing, like, you're folding. This is crazy. So you're basically thinking like, okay, well, Fedor has a better queen. You block a queen, or he hit an 8. Does he bet an 8 on the turn always? I don't think so. I think an 8 checks a decent amount on the turn here with middle pair. So this fold is just, man, he's folding a lot. All right, so here we got the king 5 of hearts against the 5-6. Flops top pair. And he elects to check this one back, which is good. Some of the time, when you have top pair, you can't always bet. But this is interesting here. You're going to check back some of your top pairs. You have to balance your range. Otherwise, people will start to pound you on the turn, which is what Fedor does here with an overbet. Okay? He makes the overbet with the bottom of his range, basically like the 6 high. He's got the gut shot, but absolutely nothing. And then for Victor, he's just got a slam dunk easy, call with the king. That's the only thing he can really do here. You never raise with the king to find out where you're at. All right, that's a good card for Fedor after, as played. So Fedor's going to bet 2,500 into 4K. Victor's got top pair. He can't just always fold this. He has, oh man, he's literally, so when you look at all these hands, right, that Fedor is getting through, Victor's folding some hands that he could call with, right? He has good, decent bluff catchers. I guess you could say that's a little unlucky for Victor that a card like that came off, because if the river was like a 3, Fedor probably has to fire again, and I would imagine Victor has a pretty easy call here. So this is an interesting one here. 9-3 of hearts. Top 2 for Victor. He's going to check. And since he does check raise a lot of his bad hands in these spots, like the 10-4s and stuff, he's going to have to, but notice he check raised a little bigger this time. So in past, he was making it 1,800. Now he's making it 2,160 with a good hand. I don't know if that's a sizing tell, but it could be. Now, if you're Fedor, you look at that and you go, okay, I have nothing, right? But do I give up? Not so fast. You have position, playing pretty deep, and you got a lot of backdoor stuff. You got the 3 hearts, you got the 3 straights, You got all kinds. And you got Victor, who's, you know, we know check raising 10-6 off in these spots. So there are ways to take the pot away. For Victor, that's actually supposed to be a good card for him to barrel because he's got a lot of flush draws in his range to check. He checks, okay. So he decides to check this card. And now Fedor turning again, this is really like the bottom of his range. Once again, bets it to try to represent. And now the river card is an 8. So bad card for Victor. The board ran out really terrible for top 2 pair. And Fedor betting just a little over half pot. Interesting bet size. Really trying to rep that he can have a 6, that he's betting like all of his flushes and stuff like that. And once again, we see Victor laying down the 7s and 5s. So really not looking to look him up at all, right? We haven't really seen much of that. And he shows the 3. All right, so we got the 4-5 of hearts. He's going to 3-bet. Again, pretty standard. Now he flops the absolute nutter butter. This is what's tough about playing against a player like Fedor, who will barrel, bet, bet, bet. When he has it, you flop top pair, you got to hang on for dear life and hope that you can somehow salvage something. So here he goes, a connected straight card, straighty board, wants a small size, so that's good. Now he's still got a very strong hand with the straight. Nothing changed there. And for Victor, he's just got a calling hand, right? He's got top pair, not folding this turn, even though it's pretty close to a pot size bet. He beats a decent amount of hands, and he's got outs, right? He's got outs. So now the river's a jack. So Victor blocks 9-10, right? Which is the nuts. And now you see Fedor jamming. So when you see a jam on the river, your opponent is essentially saying, I have a very, very good hand, right? He's not saying I have an 8 or a 7. I mean, maybe some of the time. But really, he's saying, like, I can beat a jack. Or I have a jack. Or something much stronger than that. But if he doesn't, Victor's hands is going to win. So the fact that Victor has 7-10, I don't think you're really looking well, no, I guess he could have some jacks here. I don't know. But anyway, tough spot for Victor because he does block the 9-10, and he blocks jack 10 as well, which could barrel turn and then hit the jack and go bam. So he does call this time, and then Fedor. So just like the guy's zigging and zagging, right? He's folding every time when Fedor bluffs. Hey, look who it is. It's me. Okay, this is the hand I really wanted to cover. So this is a little bit loosey-goosey from Fedor. 3-betting the ace deuce of spades is fine. Calling the 4-bet is on the looser side, right? You don't always call 4-bets depending on how your opponent's playing or whatever. The 4-bet with ace-10 is something you're going to definitely do occasionally, especially if your opponent is 3-betting too often. You know, one of the ways you can punish them is by adding hands like that to your 4-betting range. And ace-10 for Victor doesn't hit this flop, but he has the initiative. He's the 4-better. He's repping aces, kings, queens, ace, like all the big pairs. You know, Fedor could have aces and trap, but kings and queens, not really. That's really never going to call a 4-bet. It's always going to jam. So aces is really the only trap. All right, now this is the gin card. So obviously Fedor peels the flop. Victor makes top pair now. And, you know, Fedor has all the outs. So I think what you'll see here from Victor is just a jam. Or he could bet small, too. He could bet small again, actually. He could bet like 30% pot. He decides to jam. So now if you're Fedor, what would you do? Well, we know Fedor called, okay? But is this the right call? Right? This is one where you'd have to break it down because unless you think you have the best hand sometimes with ace high, you have to count the outs that you have, right? So a 3, right, is for sure probably an out, and any spade. Is that enough to call getting 2-1? I don't know. So you'd have to think that, like, you'd have to hope that your opponent has some jack queen of spades here, jack nines type hands and whatever to make this call correct. But otherwise, 19 into 16. It would be sick. It would be annoying to have to fold this turn, but I think from just a mathematical perspective, you know, you're probably not getting your right price against your opponent's range unless you factor in all the other spade draws that your opponent would 4-bet with, which isn't a ton of them. So I think this is probably an annoying fold for Fedor. I know, crazy, right? In a 4-bet pot, like how do you fold? It just makes no sense. I would hate it because I hate folding draws. So here we go. Ace-10. Ace deuce of spades, 3 or a spade is what he needs. He thought he probably had an ace as an out, does not. So another big pot there for Victor.